I'm a little nervous to be speaking with a lot of philosophers. I'm generally more attuned to social work conferences and research styles, but my dissertation chair advised me to just show up as a social worker today, and that's what I'm going to do. And indeed, my research is about social workers, the lived experiences of social workers in very unique environments who have very unique experiences. So this study focused on the research question, what are the lived experiences of social workers who practice in low-barrier shelters? What brought me to this research was my experience as a first-time social worker in a low-barrier shelter. As I engaged in this work, I started to notice a shift, or a transformation really, in myself that extended beyond my practice with clients experiencing homelessness. I started to see more clearly how acutely power structures really do oppress people and impact their lived experiences. And I started to view the world around myself, myself, and others in more nuanced ways. When we started learning about qualitative phenomenologies and methodologies in my graduate program, I became very excited and inquisitive about the phenomenological approach as a way to capture and put words to lived experience. Really, I wanted to see if other social workers were experiencing similar transformations or if they were experiencing different things. So let's orient to the research. Today I want to speak briefly as to why phenomenological methods are suited to social work research, and then give context to the low barrier shelter itself as an important component of the lived experience, providing some background as to how these shelters work, how they function, what exactly they do, and what exactly they mean. Then I'll give a brief literature review on the experience of social workers in what we might call frontline practice, and then I'll discuss data, the lived experience, and implications. So while there's been a historical debate in my profession about exactly what social work is and exactly how it should understand the social problems it's tasked with, a debate that we colloquially refer to as the function versus diagnostic debate, social work holds as a hallmark to its practice a person-environment perspective. Germain and Gitterman published their seminal life model of social work practice in 1980 that drew upon ecosystems theory and really cemented attention to the structural and environmental causes of client presentation and need to guide assessment and intervention in individual casework. Phenomenology was an apt approach to understand experience due to its focus on the embodied relationship between person and environment and ways this constructed meaning for participants. A phenomenological perspective and method examining the interconnectedness of this person and environment relationship lends well to social work, given our long-standing taproot in this ecological systems theory and our profession's attention to diverse client experiences and social justice. A phenomenological approach was able to provide the rich textural and structural descriptions of the experience through attunement to the intersubjective nature of the social worker-client-environment relationship and ways this shapes practice and therefore meaning. Low-barrier shelters lower many of the barriers that may keep people experiencing homelessness from accessing more traditional or non-secular shelters or services. They don't require sobriety, treatment compliance, or criminal-free histories. They don't require shelter users to be citizens or have documented status. They operate from housing first and harm reduction approaches that see housing as a fundamental human right and work with clients to reduce harm in behaviors and symptoms, whether that be drug or alcohol use, mental health, or sex work. The low-barrier shelter in this study served a very diverse client base. People who used substances or had extensive criminal histories, immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers, veteran sex workers, and people with a spectrum of mental health issues. This daytime shelter offered first and foremost, perhaps most importantly, a place for people to simply be. It was staffed by social workers who provided casework services while they also monitored a very busy milieu. The shelter provided basic living necessities such as laundry, mail, telephone, storage for belongings, bathrooms, showers, clothing, food, things that we as housed people really take for granted. Many of the things housed people take for granted. As one participant stated, it's definitely everybody's living room in this particular community. At the time of this study, the state where this shelter was experiencing an opiate crisis. We had a horrible governor, let's just speak truth to power here, who would not expand Medicaid to low-income individuals, so there were little treatment options. Shelter staff were trained and equipped with overdose reversal protocols that included the administration of Narcan. With all that said, there's been little peer-reviewed research on low-barrier shelters particularly, but some research has found that they function as spaces of inclusion when examined through critical theoretical contributions, such as Foucault's work on biopolitics and Agamben's work on necropolitics. Despite being heterotopias, these spaces can harbor inherent power as they challenge neoliberal norms of exclusion through their inclusion of who and what matters. So really, the shelter was the spatial container for the embodied spacetimes of the social workers' experiences. So we do all this stuff, and we're in this big room full of people, but you're just kind of doing it. You're just doing it for that moment. It's a really dirty place. The floors are very dirty, and it's very busy. There's blood and there's fluids all around. People are pouring themselves out all over the space. Blood, sweat, tears, screams, laughing. We see all these intimate things, and it's not just that we see them, but we're engaging with people throughout the process. These are quotes from the research. So I'm not going to spend too much time here, but there's a broad body of literature on social workers and practitioners on the front lines of practice. There's a lot of literature on their negative experience, such as vicarious trauma, compassion fatigue, and burnout. A bit more of a growing body of literature on the personal and professional ethos that brings people to this practice and how this solidifies their commitments to compassion, solidarity, and justice. And a small but growing body of literature on the personal transformations, such as vicarious resilience, that practitioners experience when engaging in the work. This research used an interpretive phenomenological approach in its data analysis. 6 participants were recruited from their place of work, and semi-structured interviews took place there. Reliability and trustworthiness were attended to via epoche, if I'm saying that right, reflexivity and triangulation of data through advisor and peer reviews. 4 themes in the research were found. First, social workers engage authentically with their clients during the non-representational space times of their experiences in the shelter milieu. Second, they experience trauma. Third, the social work team is a protective factor for social workers. And finally, they experience personal transformation through their work with clients. As a side note, if you ever want really rich data with beautiful language, you should just interview social workers. So I wanted to provide some of the data from the themes. So theme 1, authentic engagement. I realized that there's a vulnerability that people have in this space, and I've learned that I have to meet them in that vulnerability also and find a safe way to engage through that. It holds me to quite a high standard because I respect the folks so much that come here. I can't imagine not engaging in this way. I would lose a lot of myself, I think. It's these really intense moments where I think that if I hadn't said, "You scare me when you do this," or "I would be so sad if you died," I would feel kind of responsible. If we didn't have those really intense conversations, and instead I walked away from it and didn't share my experience, I think we would have different outcomes. I get to care for people, and people get to care for me. Reminders to do that are times when someone dies and I'm grieving with the community, and the ability to feel like it's okay if I'm tearful that day, and it's okay for that to become a part of our work, and we are grieving together. This research found that not only do social workers in this milieu experience vicarious trauma or secondary trauma, they also experience direct trauma. It's traumatic every time someone dies, and it's traumatic when people are doing poorly and they don't die. You can't expect to walk through a puddle and not get your shoes wet. You'll be stupid to think that you can surround yourself by this 5 days a week for 40 hours and not be affected by the hate speech and the violence, the suffering, the lack of resources, the untreated mental health and substance use, and the isolation that people experience. We've had 16 drug overdoses, or 16 drug reversals. Giving someone rescue breaths is a very intimate process. It's very overwhelming. There's a grief just in that, and then trauma, I think, at times in that. I don't leave my work at work ever. How do you find that balance when things are just going so wrong? The third theme that was found was about the team and the solidarity of the team. I value the relationships I have with coworkers here. That offers me a lot, and I know that without the team that we have, there's no way that I would be able to maintain doing this work at all. There's always somebody on the team that I can go to for support or guidance, or just kind of tap out and just be like, I can't do this. And people, the team here is always willing to help process or just take over if that needs to happen. It's very hard for people outside of here to understand because it's very different work. Even my friends that are in the field, I think they don't get it. And the fourth theme that my research found was that participants actually do kind of adopt the spirit of the work in their own personal transformations. It's really funny. I had a friend express this to me in a letter recently. He said, "Shannon, you were so timid. I was always quiet. I didn't speak in a class until I was a junior in college. I didn't speak. I didn't have a voice. I didn't know what my voice was. I found my voice here." He said, "You're so bold now. You're bold how you walk through life. You walk different." And it's true. It changed me on a really deep core level. I'm not going to be the person that lets misogyny slide today. I'm not going to be the person that makes excuses for broken power structures. I'm not going to be the person that turns away from somebody responding to an internal stimuli because it's hard to know what they're trying to tell me. It's rewarding in itself, but also in keeping with my growth as a person, the person that I am and who I want to be. I think it's just made me be more open, probably to all of the feelings and recognizing that that's okay. I think I've become better at recognizing what I need and working on that and knowing when things are not conducive to my mental health or to my survival, and making sure I get my needs met in a way that I wasn't before. So just a brief discussion about the findings and implications of my research. So many findings of this study run counter to the dominating literature on frontline social work practice. Engaging authentically seemed to assist participants in navigating the distressing aspects of their clients' lives, allowing them to engage in ways that strengthen values of compassion and justice, and decrease the risk of the unpredictable shelter environment. The shelter as the space itself was a crux of this research. It elicited these authentic experiences as participants navigated interactions with clients and each other in non-representational space-times. And this really speaks, I believe, to the importance of space and the construction of individual meaning, individual experience and meaning making, particularly for social work education. Participants had personally transformative experiences that highlighted how space and relationship building can be political. This study extended the literature beyond vicarious trauma to include the fact that social workers experience direct trauma as they medically respond to clients during drug overdoses, mental and medical emergencies, and death. I cannot begin to describe what the experience is like to see a person being pulled out of a bathroom unresponsive so that EMS can provide CPR, and how one really wrestles with this as a normal potentiality of showing up to the work in the environment. It causes us to question how social workers are taught concepts such as intervention and boundaries in classroom settings, as the low barrier shelter environment really elicited a very different type of interaction and boundary setting than we're taught in more clinical focus. And I believe this research really speaks to how spatial considerations can change social work practice in terms of boundary setting, interventions, and personal engagement. This research has been a springboard for my dissertation inquiry into geographies of homelessness and homeless resistance, particularly looking at how heterotopias, or the stigmatized spaces that are inhabited by people experiencing homelessness, can have therapeutic and biopolitical benefits. There's some research out in the world of geography that looks at therapeutic landscapes and how stigmatized places like homeless river bottom encampments or street boardwalks are really hotbeds for homeless resistance in terms of relation building, in terms of ownership of power, in terms of constructing meanings for self. I went really fast and I still have 2 minutes remaining. I was scared I wouldn't make it. So yeah, that's my research. Thank you so much, and thank you.